They stole my disabled daughter's wheelchair and replaced it with a rusty shopping cart. Emma was left crying, unable to move as a Navy SEAL. I confronted terrorists with more empathy than this HOA Karen. She had no clue who she was fiddling with or what hit her before watching full video. Comment below. From where you watching also like and subscribe for more stories. What do you mean she stole Emma's wheelchair? I yelled into my phone, my blood pressure skyrocketing as I clutched the steering wheel. My wife's hysterical voice crackled through the speaker. That awful HOA lady Margaret Simmons, she said. Emma's wheelchair broke some community aesthetic rule and just took it. She left a rusty grocery cart with a note explaining that it was good enough for temporary use until we repair the violation. Jack, Emma is sitting here crying. She can't even get to her room. I banged my hand against the dashboard. I'm 10 minutes away. Call the police. My name is Jack Cooper, retired Navy SEAL with 15 years of experience and 3 combat tours after leaving active duty last year. I believe the greatest battles of my life were over. I was mistaken, Emma. My 14-year-old daughter was born with cerebral palsy. Her specially made wheelchair wasn't just equipment. It was her freedom, her independence, her legs, and some power-hungry HOA president had just taken it. I screeched into our driveway, hardly remembering to shift the car into park before leaping out the sight that met me on our front porch. Made my military training take over that quiet, deadly concentration that arises when confronted with a real threat. My lovely Emma sat slumped on our porch swing, tears streaming down her face. Next to her was my wife, Rebecca, clutching a grubby shopping cart with one shaky wheel. A hot pink notice was stuck to it, visible from where I was standing. Where is she? I inquired, my voice low and menacing. Rebecca gestured across the street. In the clubhouse to attend some emergency HOA meeting regarding uncozy medical equipment in areas open to the public. I knelt before Emma, softly wiping away her tears. Princess, I'm going to set things right. Immediately, I swear. Emma lifted her brown eyes, brimming with pain. She said my seat was an eyesore, Dad. She said it was devaluing property. She made me get out of it in front of everyone at the pool. Something primal and protective rose up inside me. In my years of service, I had dealt with terrorists, warlords, and hostage situations, but nothing had ever upset me so much as watching my daughter humiliated and stranded. Stay with Mom, I told, kissing Emma's forehead before standing. I'll be right back. Rebecca caught my arm. Jack, don't do anything that'll get you arrested. I gave her a grim smile. Don't worry, I don't require violence to deal with this. Some things need a more calculated strategy. The community clubhouse was a dignified building in the middle of our affluent neighborhood. Through the big windows, I could see around 20 neighbors in folding chairs, while a woman with a perfect blonde bob gesticulated at the front, gesturing to a PowerPoint slide called Maintaining Aesthetic Standards. I didn't bother to knock. I pushed through the double doors with enough force to make them crash into the walls, shutting out the room at once. Which one of you is Margaret Simmons? I asked, looking over the shocked faces. The blonde lady at the front pulled herself up, smoothing her designer blazer. I'm the HOA president, and you are interrupting a private meeting. Mr. Cooper, Jack Cooper, the father of the disabled girl whose wheelchair you hijacked and replaced with a shopping cart. My voice resonated through the room level, but with a bite that put several attendees shift restlessly in their seats. Margaret's plastic smile did not falter. Mr. Cooper, we are talking about that same thing. If you'd like to sit down, I don't wish to sit down. I want my daughter's wheelchair back immediately. She huffed as though dealing with a particularly trying child. As I was explaining to the committee, medical equipment must be properly disguised or stored when not in active use. It's clearly outlined in Bylaw 15.3, which your family signed off on when buying your home. I slowly walked to the front of the room, stopping right in front of her. My daughter's wheelchair was in regular use. She was at the community pool, which she has every right to be, Margaret sniffed. She was sitting on a lounge chair. The wheelchair was left unoccupied for more than 20 minutes, causing an obstacle and ruining the aesthetic beauty of our newly renovated pool area. A murmur ran through the room. I turned to face the neighbors, some of whom I'd never seen since moving 3 months ago. Let me assure everyone that what occurred today, I explained coherently. My 14-year-old daughter with cerebral palsy was at the community pool, a pool which our HOA fees keep up. She rolled from her wheelchair to a lounge chair, as anyone would in order to soak up the sun. Your HOA leader then determined that her empty wheelchair was an eyesore, seized necessary medical equipment, and left my child with no means of returning home other than a broken shopping cart. The room became silent. A few people glanced down, unable to hold my eyes. Margaret cleared her throat. "You're being theatric, Mr. Cooper. I simply applied rules that everyone signed to display to me. I demanded display to me, precisely where in the bylaws it reads, you can seize medical equipment." She rummaged through some documents. "Well, not exactly, but under the general aesthetic clause. Do you realize I disrupted that what you did today was a violation of several federal statutes? The Americans with Disabilities Act forbids discrimination against people with disabilities in every aspect of public life, including HOA-managed property. This is a private community," Margaret demanded. "We have certain standards. Federal law takes precedence over your HOA rules." Miss Simmons always— I moved closer, speaking softly also. "Tampering with prescribed medical equipment is a felony." Here did you know that Margaret's tough facade cracked somewhat? I didn't tamper with anything. I merely moved. You stole my disabled daughter's mode of mobility without permission and substituted it with a shopping cart. A shopping cart. I spoke each word distinctly, leaving them hanging in the air. Do you know how humiliating that was for her? An older man in the front row stood up. "Margaret, is this true? You substituted the girl's wheelchair with a shopping cart." Margaret's cheeks flushed. "It was a temporary fix until what?" Another voice shouted out, "Until she crawled home." The room burst into murmurs of disapproval. Margaret attempted to retake control, slamming a gavel on the podium. "Order, we have protocols for these discussions." I turned my back to her, speaking directly to the room. "What you all might not know is that I'm a retired Navy SEAL. I spent 15 years defending this nation and the rights of every American, including the right to live with dignity, no matter physical capability." The reference to my military experience altered the climate immediately. A few individuals sat up straighter in my time in the military. I encountered adversaries who were more human than what I see today. I'm not here to intimidate anyone. I'm here as a father requesting fundamental decency and respect for my daughter. A woman in the back stood up. "My brother lost his leg in Afghanistan. The concept that someone would steal his prosthetic and refer to it as an eyesore is disgusting." I motioned to return the wheelchair immediately and issue a formal apology. "Seconded," called several voices at once. Margaret tried one last defense. "This is not the way we do business. We have to go about things the right way." "Where is my daughter's wheelchair at the moment?" I demanded. Margaret's eyes flashed to a storage closet along one side of the room. "It's been temporarily locked until I didn't wait for her to finish." I walked to the closet and found it locked without hesitation. I took a paperclip from a nearby desk, straightened it, and had the simple lock open in seconds. A basic skill from my training days in Emma's purple custom wheelchair rested against the wall, half sheltered by a tarp, as if it were something to be ashamed to conceal. I pulled it out, inspecting it for damage. Carefully, this wheelchair had cost $27,000. I declared to the room, "It is custom designed to fit my daughter's body to avoid pressure sores and muscle atrophy. It is not an accessory or convenience, it is part of her." I turned to Margaret, who stood statue-like by her podium. "If I see so much as one scratch or movement on this chair, I will exercise every legal right at my disposal, beginning with criminal charges for altering medical equipment, and followed up with a civil rights action that will be front-page news nationwide." The threat of publicity apparently stung Margaret more than anything else. Her precisely groomed image was evidently of great significance to her. Now I pressed on. "I'm returning this to my daughter, but this isn't finished," as I pushed the chair toward the door. A man stood up in a suit. "Mr. Cooper, I'm David Wilson, Vice President of the HOA, and also an attorney representing the board. I want to apologize for this situation. This action was taken without knowledge or full board approval." He turned to speak to Margaret. "I move to call an emergency vote on Margaret's role as president In light of this obvious violation of ethics and possibly criminal action, seconded were various voices. Margaret's began to fade of color. You can't do that short of proper notice. Article 8, Section 3 of our bylaws permits emergency removal of officers upon gross misconduct, David answered calmly. I think taking away a disabled child's wheelchair would qualify. I left them to fight it out procedurally while I fixed my attention on returning Emma's wheelchair to her as I pushed it up our driveway. Emma's face lit up with relief and happiness. She slid off the porch swing and utilized her crutches to meet me halfway. You got it back, she whispered, stroking her hand fondly over the familiar hand rim. Of course I did, princess, I replied, assisting her into it. No one screws over my daughter. Rebecca came down the steps, her face questioning. What happened? Let's just say there's about to be a change in HOA leadership, answered as our doorbell rang. I opened it to see David Wilson and a few other neighbors on our porch. Mr. Cooper, we wanted to personally apologize to Emma, David said. What happened today doesn't reflect our community values. A woman stepped forward and introduced herself as Helen. I'm a physical therapist. I'd be happy to make sure the wheelchair is still correctly calibrated for Emma at no cost. Another neighbor, an older man named Frank, cleared his throat. My late wife had used a wheelchair for 10 years. I know how crucial good equipment is. We had an instant vote and stripped Margaret of her post. David is interim president until formal elections next month. I was taken aback by the quick action. In sincere regret, Emma wheeled herself forward. Thank you, she said merely. It was scarily bad not having my chair. Helen knelt beside Emma. Would it be all right if we formed a neighborhood accessibility committee with your assistance? Of course, we might be able to ensure all our facilities are really accessible and friendly. Emma's face lit up. That would be great. I have plenty of ideas in the next few hours. Our living room full of neighbors delivering apologies, casseroles and offers of support. What had begun as a nightmare became something unforeseen. A real community building around us. Later that night, as I put Emma into bed, she asked, Did you have to go all Navy SEAL on them, Dad? I laughed. People need to get reminded that there is actually a real human behind every disability aid tool. I was proud of you, she said, dozing off. You didn't even have to throw out your menacing face. I kissed her forehead. I waited until she went to sleep, so I saved that for special occasions afterward. I followed Rebecca onto the porch. Interesting day, I sighed, draping an arm around her. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you weren't a former SEAL, she pondered. Pardon me, what about people who don't have someone to battle for them like that? The question lingered in the air, encouraging me. 2 days later, I filed a nonprofit organization, Operation Accessibility Advocates. We would offer legal aid and advocacy for families experiencing disability discrimination in housing cases. As in Margaret Simmons' case, she was given a formal censure by the HOA and ordered to perform 40 hours of community service with disability assistance organizations. The local newspaper printed a small article about the incident that was picked up by some disability rights blogs. 3 weeks later, her home came on the market. I heard around the neighborhood grapevine that she was moving to a community with no HOA. Apparently, she'd suddenly had second thoughts about overreaching governance. Emma's wheelchair stayed just as it was, proudly on display whenever and wherever she might need it. The new HOA regulations, written with consultation from Emma herself, specifically guarded the rights of disabled residents and discrimination in any form. Occasionally, I reflect on that terrible day and what we learned in the military. I found that the most significant wars aren't always waged with guns, but with unshakable principles and standing up for what is right. And sometimes the strongest statement is not made with violence or intimidation, but with a simple question: is this who we wish to be as a community? The reply, luckily, was a resounding no. And within that reply, we found our true home.